Good morning. We're here to talk about Parshat Ki Teitzei as well as the Jewish response to H1N1. Many of you may have seen about 2 weeks ago there was a news item that came out of Yediot Achronot, an Israeli newspaper, and was later picked up by as diverse sources as the USA Today and the Stephen Colbert Report about a group of rabbis that took a flight, 50 rabbis from Ben Gurion Airport, carrying Kabbalistic rabbis that flew around the land of Israel in order to prevent the swine flu virus from spreading through Israel by saying special prayers. And as the rabbi whose father had organized the flight explained, he said the purpose of the flight was to stop the epidemic, thus preventing further deaths. We are certain that because of our prayers, danger is already behind us. Now, I certainly have no objection to prayer. Prayer is actually a foundation of Judaism, and without prayer, really, Judaism is inconceivable. And I certainly have no objection to Kabbalah. But I do have some problems with this flight. I mean, obviously, it is a puzzling way of expressing prayer. In the Bible and in the Talmud, the method of prayer is so much more prosaic, where man just opens up his heart and begins to talk to God. And I'm not certain, or I'm rather uncertain as to why you can't express this prayer while sitting on the ground. But aside from that, what really bothered me about this particular flight is that it distorted the Jewish view of how to respond to H1N1. The Jewish way of dealing with a health crisis is to improve health safety. And that's rather manifest in this week's Torah reading. The Torah reading says very simply that when a person builds a house, and ki tivneh bayit chadash, a person builds a new home, v'yasita ma'aka legagecha, you should put a fence around the roof of the home. In those days, the roofs of the homes were flat, and people generally would go up on the roof. And if a roof didn't have a fence, there would be a concern that someone could fall off. And therefore, the Torah continues and says, "V'lo tasim damim b'veitecha ki yipol hanofel mimenu." And therefore, if you put up a fence, you will not be responsible for the blood of the person who will fall off the roof. And essentially, what the Torah is doing is it's legislating safety. It's reminding us that safety is a religious concern. And although I have no problems with prayer, on the contrary, prayer is fundamental and needs to be encouraged. At the same time, we as Jews have to understand we have a holistic vision of the world, and that as we pray, at the very same time we take care of safety. And if the same types of resources would have been put into putting in Purell dispensers in every yeshiva and educating every yeshiva student about the dangers of H1N1 and what is necessary to prevent the spread of this particular virus, I would have been much happier. You know, there are stories that are told about Dr. Moshevalak, who was a very religious Jew and was the first director of the Shaarei Tzedek Hospital in Jerusalem, beginning in 1902. And it seems that what he would do, his practice was that when a patient was being wheeled in for an operation, he would actually ask the person for his Hebrew name so that he could say a Mishaberach prayer on that person's behalf before he would operate on him. And this is essentially the Jewish view. We pray, but we don't forget about the fact that our religious obligations include safety and include taking initiative in the physical world to ensure that health is taken care of. And this is really, I think, my fundamental problem here, is that we have forgotten that safety and health are religious concerns. We as Jews have bought into a Hollywood picture, a distortion of ourselves, into believing that we must act only in the most exotic of ways. So if we take a bunch of long-bearded rabbis and put them on a flight and have them blow shofars while circling around the land of Israel, that conforms to the Hollywood vision, the Hollywood narrative of what a Jew should look like, and therefore it conforms, frankly, to our own internalized vision of what a Jew should look like. And that's a terrible mistake. The Jewish response to H1N1 is building fences. That is the authentic Jewish response, not flying in planes. And in fact, it reminds me of a story that they tell about the late Klosenberger Rebbe, Rabbi Yekutiel Halberstam, that after World War II, and having endured a great deal of suffering and the loss of his own family, he made a personal vow that he would remove the suffering of every other individual. And when he arrived in the land of Israel in Netanya, he decided that his goal was to build a hospital to ensure the health and safety of the people there. And when he began to make inquiries to the health ministry, the health minister essentially looked down upon him, condescended to him, and said, "Rabbi, I'll build the hospital. You'll put up the mezuzah." To which the Kloisenberger Rebbe said, "No, on the contrary, I'm going to build the hospital. When I have it opened, I'll invite you, the Mr. Health Minister, to put up the mezuzah." Because to the Kloisenberger Rebbe, the hospital was a religious concern. Safety and health are religious concerns, and they need to be pursued in the most practical, this-worldly fashion. Jews do not need to be exotics. We need to be religious. And to be religious is to build fences, not to fly planes.